obecni online. Witam też tych, którzy dołączą. Mam nadzieję, że się dowiedzą, że byli przywitani. I teraz przejdę na język angielski, bo nasz gość dzisiaj jest angielskojęzyczny. Po wystąpieniu naszego gościa będą jak zawsze jakby możliwość się pytać na czacie lub bezpośrednio. Wyjątkowo nie będę moderował dyskusji ja zrobię tylko wstęp i tym razem koleżanka Kinga Torbicka będzie prowadziła debatę. So let me now say hello, a very warm hello to our guest, Borjan Gjuzelov. Do I pronounce it well, Borjan?
Yes, yes.
It's okay. So you are a specialist on the Balkan topics. You were working on democratization, on now a lot on corruption, and you propose us a very ambitious synthesis of 30 years of evolutions, or rather what is happening 30 years after the fall down of Yugoslavia, where what can we expect from the attempt of democratization, if I understood well your proposition. Am I right?
Yes, I will try to give a snapshot from the democratization, the specific democratization context of the Western Balkans, and I'm very much looking forward to the discussion. And if I may say, I'm also thrilled to and very happy to accept your invitation, because I really enjoy academia. I am sort of part of academia, although currently I work for the OSCE, Organization for Cooperation and Security, in the mission to Skopje, North Macedonia.
So the floor is yours. I give you the word, and hello to Skopje, where you have no snow. Warsaw is under the snow, like Vienna and Prague. So in southeastern Europe, you have a better weather, and I give the word, and after your presentations, we will have matter for more elaborated discussions. Thank you very much once again that you accepted to be with us today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nicholas. I will now start sharing my presentation, and then because I was thinking whether I need presentation or not, but then I decided to have presentation because it's always good to visualize certain things, and also to have better, look at the structure of this this seminar. Give me just a second. I would like to, So thank you, Nicholas, for the introduction. I am Borjan Gjuzelov. I worked on democratization and anti-corruption for many years already, and I'm having a PhD in politics from Queen Mary University of London. Today, I hope I will give you an overview and of key democratization perspectives, but also challenges of the Western Balkan region. As you may know, may not know, Western Balkans as a region has been identified in 1998 during the Austrian presidency of the European Union as a region different than other regions or other aspirant at that time members of candidate countries of the EU. And it was originally consisted of countries, successor states of Yugoslavia, minus Slovenia plus Albania. So that means Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Serbia, Macedonia, Kosovo, Montenegro, and Albania. Later on, this region was restricted to the countries, the latter 6 countries, because Croatia became member of the European Union in 2013. And this, I would say, label Western Balkans is sometimes seen a bit as an unfortunate, group of countries that are still not members of the EU, although they belong to Europe, and most of them have started EU accession negotiations. And one of these countries is the country where I'm coming from, now labeled as North Macedonia. The region consists of 18 million inhabitants. So the outline for today's seminar is based on 3 pillars. We'll discuss illiberal politics as the main challenge of the democratization of these countries. And then we will discuss the EU membership prospects of these countries. And we'll end up by discussing prospects that might change the dynamics, the rather pessimist dynamic outlined in the previous 2 sections. And now I will start with illiberal politics. So countries of the Western Balkans are characterized to different extents with several features of illiberal politics. One of the features is unfair political competition that is brought to the table by widespread clientelism and influence on the media, or popularly called as media capture. This means that the playing field, the electoral playing field, is unlevel, and often incumbents, so parties in power, enjoy privileged access to resources that helps them maintain political power, while opposition parties, contrary to the incumbents, face with numerous problems how to attract voters and how to eventually take over power. That creates now already a recurring pattern of parliamentary boycotts and social and public protests, because in most of the countries in the region, at least at some stage in the past 10 years, there was mass opposition protests and parliament boycotts as a result of the unlevel playing field, because opposition feels they are not able to compete fairly on elections, and that's why they have to challenge power by means that are not part of the legitimate everyday political contestation that occurs within institutions, and primarily within the parliament. This also means that widespread clientelism that can be electoral or systemic clientelism. This means one-off transactions during election days or during election campaign, where usually incumbent parties go to citizens who usually have less economic power, and they basically try to buy their vote. But then also there is a systemic long-term clientelism that is generated by public employments, by system of favorable public procurements, where public tenders are given to companies that support or finance these political parties. And all of that generates this winner-takes-all attitude of politics in the Western Balkans. That is, I don't think, too far away from other Eastern European post-communist countries. Also, another aspect of illiberal politics is widespread corruption at many levels that creates culture that is created, but also reinforced by the practice of impunity. That means not complete rule of law in the countries, in all of the Western Balkan countries. That results with low trust in institutions, spoils system instead of merit system, favoritism, and brain drain, because many competent people simply don't want to be part of a corrupt system and do whatever necessary to go abroad. And this is obviously a great problem for most of the countries in the region. And but this is also a brain drain as a problem, as a challenge, is also a problem for member states. So this is something that I'm very particularly interested to exchange with you in our future, forthcoming discussion. Also, another important aspect of illiberal politics in this region is the role of the civil society that has a disillusioned character, namely because there is vibrant, on one hand, we can argue there is a vibrant civil society that can be and is a significant corrective to the government. However, most of the traditional civil society organizations, they are established and sustained with donor support, foreign donor support. And although for me personally, that's not illegitimate, quite the contrary, because most of these organizations advocate for values of integrity, good governance, rule of law. They don't have good relationship with the constituency, with citizens. So they are donor-driven. They represent good values, but their message is not always well communicated with the general public. So public space is still dominated by political parties who take all possible means to monopolize politics and the political. But politics and the political space should be much broader than party politics. And that's why the role of civil society is not the existing role of civil society is not enough to address political party monopoly that is, as I mentioned before, generated and sustained by clientelism, corruption, and influence over state institutions, particularly influence over rule of law institutions and the judiciary, that really enables these countries to create true impartial application of the laws. That means political party leaders, primarily from the ruling parties, but also other powerful individuals, businessmen, oligarchs, they enjoy preferred treatment and they have power, like individual charismatic power, to overcome the power of still weak institutions. So that's sort of one of the main features of illiberal politics in the Balkans. And on the top of that is the vulnerability to external influence. And here that doesn't only mean vulnerability to, so to say, autocratic or semi-authoritarian external influences that are present also in other EU member states, like Russian influence or influence from China via technology, via soft power, via cheap labor force, or investments in cheap credits for investments in public infrastructure projects, but also sort of dependence, maybe not vulnerability, but dependence on Western EU or US influence to do the good stuff in the country. So state institutions are overly dependent on, but also not only state institutions, also civil society is overly dependent on foreign aid to do good things, while citizens and some of the political parties are also vulnerable to external influence from authoritarian states or semi-authoritarian states that promote values that are contrary to the European values. And here it's not only Russia and China, but also Turkey, especially amongst the Muslim population in the Western Balkans, and there is also some influence and a lot of capital from Gulf states that also can be interpreted as potential risk for the democracy and driver of illiberal politics in the Western Balkans, given the fact that, again, as I mentioned, state institutions are weak. So I would say that most of these things are present also in some of the EU member states. However, given the fact that the region is out of the EU, and given the fact that institutions are not independent enough to deal with these things, here the problem is more pronounced than in EU member states. And talking about the EU, now we get to the second pillar of my analysis or overview, and that's the role that EU and the EU membership perspective has in all of these countries. So here we should emphasize the leverage for reforms and the external factor for democratization and good governance that that is so that the EU is perceived as, and that's rightly the right way to be perceived, as the driver and the anchor of, democratization and good governance in the region. A lot of donor money and a lot of EU money are spent on rule of law, public administration reform, as well as support for the economy, to make the economy more competitive, support for agriculture, for regional development, to, prepare these countries for future membership in the Union. And that's also that's why all of the political thinkers and political elite in the region look at the EU as the way out of the illiberal politics and the equilibrium of illiberalism that I just mentioned before. However, because of other factors, both internal and external, these countries are not able to join the EU in a foreseeable future. So Serbia and Montenegro started EU membership negotiations almost 1 decade ago. And although they had some progress and they opened most of the chapters and closed some of the negotiation chapters, there is still no foreseeable date of accession for these countries. In regards Albania and North Macedonia, the thing is they are even more distant. So although North Macedonia is candidate country since 2006, due to bilateral disputes, first with Greece and with Bulgaria, so both EU member states, Macedonia was unable to open accession talks, and de facto opened accession talks only this summer. But this is still under question mark, because there are still things that need to be sorted out between Macedonia and Bulgaria due to the bilateral issues that I would say Bulgaria has with North Macedonia as a candidate country. Also, unlike enlargement waves in the 2000s, when most of the Eastern Europe became part of the EU, currently there is an obvious enlargement fatigue among EU member states that is due to various reasons that also slows down and weakens the EU membership perspective for EU for Western Balkan countries, and that also weakens up reforms and the leverage against illiberal politics in the region. On the top of that, there are still frozen conflicts, primarily between the dispute between Serbia and Kosovo. Namely, Serbia is not recognizing Kosovo independence, and although there is this famous already Pristina-Belgrade dialogue that lasts for more than a decade now, there is no foreseeable solution, and that's a big burden primarily for Serbia, but also for Kosovo, because without fully recognized independence of Kosovo, the EU cannot really offer Kosovo EU candidacy. Plus, there are 5 EU member states that, because of the disputed independence of Kosovo, are not recognizing still Kosovar independence. So this is also slowing down EU membership perspective, not only for Serbia and Kosovo, but for the entire region, because, and that's another thing that decreases the leverage. So although maybe 10 years ago, this narrative that the EU will bring not only economic prosperity, but also rule of law and good governance, now fades away slowly, because not only citizens, but also elites don't really see any foreseeable membership for these countries. Now, lately, there are some announcements, public announcements, that if everything works well, if reforms in these countries are at the best possible level, there might be an opportunity for future enlargement in 2030. So this is like 8 years ahead. And this, for none of the existing political elites, that's not a reason to enter into painful reforms, painful for them, where many of them and many of their oligarch supporters would lose the monopoly of power and the privileges they enjoy currently, being part of being out of the EU. So in order to enter the EU, candidate countries need to really demonstrate fight against high-level corruption, organized crime, and many of those who would need to be subject to that kind of fight against corruption are, in one way or another, at the top of the societal pyramid. And none of the political leaders would like to sacrifice his or her privileges or his or her position in society vis-a-vis corrupt elites to perform or engage in reforms without having the prospect that his country would enter the EU during his or her mandate. Because none of the politicians that today rule in these countries is not sure that he or she would be in power in 2030 or 2032 to 2034. And that's why none of them is fully invested in meaningful reforms. If hypothetically the EU membership perspective or the date for future membership is 2025, like in 3 years, I mean, this is hypothetical and not really possible. In that case, political elites would be incentivized to sacrifice maybe some of their, privileges, some of their access to some of their undue influence over judiciary, impunity, and so on and so forth, to be recognized as the government or the political elite that entered or helped this country enter the EU. Like that was the case, for instance, in Croatia, when biggest rule of law reforms and biggest convictions, high-level convictions on corruption, happened in the past, in the year before the country entered the Union. And this is well documented in the literature on Europeanization and enlargement. And talking about a lack of EU leverage, I authored an op-ed 2 years ago called Pretended Europeanization, which means that currently in the region and the relationship between EU and the region is a pretended Europeanization. The EU pretends that is interested in enlargement. Of course, it's difficult to say the EU because there are so many divergent interests and preferences within EU member states. But from our, perspective of citizens of the Western Balkans and scholars, the EU, on official level, always say, sort out rule of law, do the necessary homework, and we are waiting for you with open hands. While on the other side, almost every politician, but I would say every incumbent politician in the Western Balkan region, with exemption of Republika Srpska, which is an entity part of Bosnia and Herzegovina, is always winning elections on the pro-EU narrative. And there is still majoritarian support for EU membership, although it's in a notable decline in the last years. But they still win elections, promising to their electorates that they will do everything to help their own country enter the EU, which means they will fight crime, they will fight corruption, they will make effective, public administration reform, they will help judiciary establish its full independence, and so on and so forth. In practice, most of these leaders are doing what I mentioned in the previous slide. They're just monopolizing political space in order to build up and maintain and secure their own political power. So they also pretend they are interested into Europeanization. And this generates a game where everyone pretends they do something, while in practice they do the opposite. And also the literature on Europeanization recognizes this concept of empty shells, which means adopting EU legislation, checking up boxes, convincing people in Brussels that everything is already adopted and that we are formally ready to start negotiations or to finalize negotiations. However, in practice, there are still old unwritten rules ruling, or informal rules, or emerging ways how to avoid existing EU sponsored reforms and legislation, which ends up having empty shells reforms. So reforms that exist on paper, but do not really exist in practice. And that's, I recognize that this is also a great problem for the countries of the Western Balkans, of course. And now talking about these two rather pessimistic aspects of Western Balkan post-communist reality, so illiberal politics and distant, so to say, EU membership perspective, I would like to go to the next point, and that's the looking forward aspect, where I will try to offer one prospect of future democratization of the region, And I'm also very much looking forward to discuss some of these aspects, but also to learn more how these aspects would work in Poland. Because I don't know much about Poland, but I'm very much interested how these topics relate to Polish reality nowadays. So, if we have a lock-in effect of corrupt political leadership, a lot of electoral clientelism that keeps people recurringly voting for bad guys in politics, and if the EU itself or the EU membership perspective is not the sufficient leverage to change this, circle of clientelistic governance, how can things change? One answer is the recent rise of digital economy in these countries. So, for instance, according to some data that will be referenced later on, Serbia and North Macedonia are the two amongst the three countries with highest number of freelancers, digital freelancers per capita in the world. So many young people work in the global outsourcing industries as freelancers, but also as individuals working for companies that almost every day are getting open, and not only in countries' capitals like Skopje, Belgrade, but also in smaller cities around the Western Balkan countries, that are different call centers or some primarily low-skilled jobs that pay very well. So currently, for instance, in Skopje, you can hardly find good service in restaurants and cafes, because all of the good waitress people who were working in hospitality industry and are younger but speak English or speak some English, working as in these outsourcing companies, or start to work as freelancers. And they immediately start earning at least double they earned before. They start traveling. They start working on themselves, enrolling to various courses to further improve their practical knowledge. Some of them don't have any university education, or have some education that some university degree that they never really thought they will use it. So they work something that is maybe not directly related to their professional or university education. However, they earn a lot for local standards. On the top of that, there is rise of IT companies. I'm sure most of you are very familiar with this phenomenon. So software engineers and other related professions within the IT industry, who earn probably 3 or 4 times more than the average salary in the country. So this rise of digital economy generates a group of young people, usually young people, but not necessarily too young. I mean, people, they might be between 20 and 40 years old, who enjoy primarily economic freedom, but also political freedom that their parents never really had. Because remember, most of the liberal politics, most of the clientelist lock-in effect that I explained before has been a product of economic uncertainty, low salaries and poverty and unemployment that were a result of the 90s prolonged transition from socialism to market economy. And don't forget, the region we're talking about was a region where we had war for more than 5 years in the 90s. Most of the countries had, like for instance, Macedonia didn't have war, but had an ethnic conflict in 2001. So there was a lot of economic uncertainty that was taken over by political parties who monopolized political space and made people recurringly vote for them, although they were not really delivering what they were promising on elections. However, the rise of digital economy and the opportunities that are currently in place helps people have primarily economic freedom that needs to be, and this is something that would be a challenge in the following years, how to transfer this political economic freedom into political, not only autonomy, but also agency, to make these people be engaged middle-class citizens. Because without, vibrant middle class and upper middle class that is economically independent to vote against corrupt leaders in favor of new people in politics, we cannot really look for effective democratic checks and balances, effective democratic civic oversight over the work of institutions and over the party-based politics. And here I'm also stressing out the importance of the popularly called Gen Z, so the generation Z, people born between 1998 and 2010 or 2012, depends on which definition we look at. That are people who, or this generation is labeled in Western Europe as the most activist generation, of the first generation in people's history that is ready to lead by example, to lead societal change by example. Now I would use one interesting example. So of people who are ready to stop eating meat and become vegans in order to help the cause of their social cause of environmental protection and environmentalism. So no generation before that, in such massive amount of numbers, was ready to change their own personal habits or their own personal life to do something for something they think it's important, for instance, environmentalism. So although there is already a great recognition that Generation Z is a big agent of change in Western Europe, figures, although this is very under-researched, and this is something I would like to further research more in the future, most of Gen Zs in the Western Balkans, despite being exposed to digital economy, despite earning double their parents earn, despite having same access to internet, are not even closely socially engaged like their peers in the Western Europe. They see politics as something dirty, as something related to what I was explaining before, related to illiberal politics, related to party dominance over politics. And now there is a big challenge how to motivate these people. Maybe they don't need to become vegans, but how to motivate them to engage into positive societal change, how to make them more engaged, and how to really make the most of their democratic potential. Because I genuinely believe that these two factors, rise of digital economy and the specific character of Gen Zs, can be the most important driver for these societies, and that's why I believe that political and social elites need to refocus the existing democratization and civil society agenda from the Europeanization narrative to a new narrative that will be based on the existing exposure of these countries to digital economy. Like, these countries are already part of the globalized world. They are part of Europe, especially younger generations. They watch Netflix. They just need to be more engaged to live very similar life and to demand change, institutional and political change from the political elites. This would be, in a nutshell, the overview of Western Balkans democratization prospects or problems 3 decades after the breakup of communism. I tried to use this outline based on 3 pillars to kind of conceptualize the seminar, but that doesn't mean that we need to be restricted only to these 3 pillars. And I'm really much looking forward to the discussion. This is some of the potential additional reading related to that I used to conceptualize this brief lecture. Of course, there is many more to be said and to be read. And now I would like to open the floor for discussion with this ironic and rather funny picture that is a good allegory of some of the phenomena that I covered before. So we have formal institutions. Most of the form of democratization is already fulfilled. However, that doesn't really lead to the purpose of having better quality of life, better rule of law, competitive economy, and fair elections. Thank you all. And for the discussion, since I was speaking generically for Western Balkans without stressing out too many details for any of the particular countries. So if you are interested in any particular country, I will do my best to also address that kind of questions or comments.
Thank you very much, Borjan, for your very rich and very interesting presentation about the very important region, Western Balkans. Thank you very much. And we invite you to ask the questions or the comments. You can raise your hand or write your comments and questions on the chat. So you are very welcome. And Borjan will try to respond for your all questions. So maybe I will start. I would like to ask you about the very actual topic, war in Ukraine. What do you think how the recent war in Ukraine could affect and maybe affect already the political and geopolitical situation of the Balkans?
Thank you, Kinga. Very good question. I have spent some time thinking about the same. And I think that it will definitely, so the global insecurity and the threat, the security threat that we are as Europeans currently facing would definitely make Europe and the EU more determined to address, or should, I'm not saying definitely, because that's maybe too strong word. So to rephrase, the threat that Europe is facing should make Europe more determined in addressing any cause of potential instability on the border with Europe, in the Western Balkans, or within Europe and European member states. Because we are aware that the insecurity is already spilling over in Europe and in the EU and in European member states. So there are two scenarios, optimistic and pessimistic. The pessimistic scenario is that if everything remains more or less the same, countries of the Western Balkans would become even more vulnerable to Russian influence, especially some of these countries like Serbia, but also parts of Bosnia and Herzegovina and Montenegro, Macedonia, because people would think that, okay, we are waiting for the EU for so long and we don't get any tangible prospect of joining the EU. And they would look, and to my surprise, many people still have some sort of sympathy towards Russia. And some public opinion figures show that. And this is because people are disappointed from EU membership prospects. For instance, in Macedonia, many look at the EU as someone who is having, as an entity with double standards, because Macedonia had to change the name into North Macedonia to sort out problems with one of the EU member states, with Greece, because that was precondition for membership, although no other country ever had such strong precondition, although other candidate countries before also had maybe some disputes with existing member states. Then now there is a dispute with Bulgaria due to different understanding of, I would say, joint history. And primarily, Bulgarian position is that the Macedonian nation didn't exist before Yugoslavia, and that everything has been set up by Yugoslav elites to distinguish people living currently here from Bulgarians. This is very offensive for majority of ethnic Macedonians. So people are disappointed that they need to do so many different things in order to still be in the line of prospective EU membership. However, we are not really having any foreseeable, prospect. So that's the pessimistic way, that there will be a destabilization. Optimistic way is that EU leaders will show leadership and would be proactive and would prevent this threat of destabilization and more growing sympathy of the public opinion towards Russia, and would show that the region really belongs to Europe, would pretend less, would take more determined actions against corrupt politicians and corrupt elites in the region. This is not only in regards EU, but also US. And that would help the region enter the EU sooner than 2030. So the best way or the most perfect scenario would be if really we are put on the fast track of EU negotiations. At least countries that are in the negotiations. So Montenegro, Serbia, who are negotiating for membership for almost a decade, and Albania and North Macedonia, who started EU accession negotiations this summer.
Okay, so I am for the optimistic scenario. So we have one question from Piotr Michalak. So please welcome.
Okay, I want to comment on what you said about Generation Z. And you said that they engage in various societal activities and that they are more active than the previous generation. But I was thinking, you said also that there's, well, that's a fact, basically, that there's now widespread access to the internet, and many people view themselves now as so-called citizens of the world. So I think that, and you gave an example of being socially active because the Generation Z, for example, many people turn to being vegan so that they help the environment, but it's kind of like helping the earth and not local how do you call it, like local people. So maybe the political inactivity isn't that strange. I hope that it was clear what I meant to say. So
no, it's not strange. There are many reasons behind that, and the main reason is that they feel powerful, so they don't want to engage in politics, you know? Unlike their parents who were weak, poor, and had to be not really engaged in politics, but supporting political parties to keep their employments, to get maybe better public employment, or if they are small business, to finance illegally political parties, to keep winning, public procurement tenders, and so on and so forth. So like the new generation, they are rebellious and they don't want to engage with politics. They would go to Zanzibar for vacation.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
So the narrative, the challenge of democratization actors and universities, political elites should be to convince them that politics is not necessarily the dirty party politics, but is also taking care of local community, environment, street dogs, you name it, you know. And thank you for referring to Gen Zs. There is also another feature that is a big or potentially can be a problem. That's even in developed democracies, yes, they are engaged, but due to their exposure to internet and due to the unregulated nature of internet, they are also very vulnerable to fake news, to political extremes, both far right and far left, but far right in particularly. And this is another aspect that is also very pronounced in the Western Balkans. Because according to some research on media literacy or media illiteracy, young people of the region are really vulnerable to fake news that are everywhere on the internet. And their exposure to social media doesn't really help. So that's another thing that should be on the agenda as a problem, as a threat for further democratization.
Thank you very much. If there is some other questions maybe or comments, if not, I will continue this discussion with Borjan. If I understood well, you are from Macedonia. You are Macedonian.
Yes.
Okay, so I will ask you why do you think the Macedonia will be so important for the EU, and what will be the added value of this cooperation, and what do you think, in which specific areas this cooperation will be so important for the EU from your Macedonian perspective?
Very good question. Why? Often
I have only the good questions, a lot of questions.
Well, Macedonia is only 2 million, less than 2 million. It's landlocked. It's not, although we were taught in school that we are having the key geographical position in the Balkans, which might be partially true. I wouldn't say that's the region, the thing that I would not outline that as the key reason why EU needs Macedonia. I would say EU needs the entire region to guarantee peace and stability, to guarantee certainty, not only for the region, but also for the neighboring, not only for the neighboring EU member states, but for also other not neighboring member states. Because EU as primarily an economic project is based on stability, guaranteeing that things would be same or better in the future 5-10 years. And that's why I think EU should really or will benefit from the Western Balkans and from Macedonia. More specifically, also Macedonia is, for good or bad, a model of multi-ethnic democracy. So we have 1/4 of the citizens ethnic Albanians, plus there are other ethnic and religious minorities. And but it's a unitary state. And the way how Macedonian constitutional organization works since Ohrid Framework Agreement signed in 2001 is a unique model of power sharing and integration without assimilation, at least on the paper, but also in practice. the entire region, not only Macedonia, is a region where nation building has been a bit later than in Western Europe. And there are multiple ethnic conflicts, as I mentioned. Some of them were really bloody in the 90s. Now the region is far more stable than before, but we never know. Maybe in 50 years, things might complicate again. However, Macedonian model of power sharing has many positive features and is, I would say, a positive example to some extent how two and more ethnic communities, by giving all possible or most of the ethnic rights that they could have, like we have bilingual system, they have full right to study in native language and so on and so forth. How this offers perspective for non-majoritarian groups, and how it keeps people represented in the system, and hopefully that would preserve peace. And that's, I think, one of the positive sides of that can be brought to the EU. Of course, there are downsides of this system, primarily because ethnic Albanian political parties are abusing ethnic quotas, for instance, to install party loyal people in government. That also undermines the rule of law. That also undermines the legitimacy of this idea of multi-ethnic, society. But that's on the institutional level. But on a societal and cultural level, even before the constitution from 2001, after the ethnic conflict, this region, these societies were living in a quite unique multi-ethnic environment. So there is tradition of multi-ethnicism that was not always a happy tradition. There were bloody episodes. But if institutions offer equal opportunities to all, not only to ethnic groups, but to citizens, individuals, and fair treatment, this might be a very positive example of integration that may, on a long run, also be beneficial for the EU and EU member states.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, I understand. So, do you have some questions? No, if not, so I will continue. As you mentioned, the process of EU accession negotiations for your region has slowed down. We had this last declaration of Tirana. What do you think? There is any possibilities or any ideas about how to accelerate this process?
Well, as I mentioned, I think now it's time for leadership in Brussels to move these countries on a fast track. And that would be also beneficial mostly for the EU, to show commitment, to show to the region and to other parts of Europe that no one will be left behind from the idea of common European future.
Okay.
Now I sound like a politician, but I think this is the thing that really the most tangible, action that can change things. Of course, I can talk about rule of law reforms. I'm personally engaged into rule of law reforms in North Macedonia. I worked on rule of law projects that were also regional. There is improvement, but it's slow, and it's not enough to really be recognized as something really revolutionary that would, we can, as societal elites, as countries, we cannot be so good to speed up the process if the EU doesn't speed up the process first.
And what do you think about the role of countries of Visegrad Group, Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary had in the past the same situation? They were also the candidates to the EU, and in the many declarations of this group, we read about that Western Balkans are the priority of these countries. If in your opinion, this Visegrad Group will help and will manage this integration with EU?
I think they are quite firm supporters of the region and the enlargement, and probably because that they themselves went through the same process, but also because of the prospect to have more, I would say, similar countries with similar past within or around the managing structures in Brussels. And I think most of the Western Balkan countries have also very good bilateral relations to Visegrad Group countries. And also, probably there is also something with being Slavic that helps this not only political relationship, but also sense of closeness between citizens. And lately, I can see that there is a lot of tourists coming to Skopje from Czechia, from Poland, and I'm really happy that there is more and more post-COVID interaction and traveling.
Yes, we could talk a lot about Slavic solidarity. So maybe the last question, and this is my favorite about China, because we observe in your region very active China's investments. We saw a bridge in Croatia, a high-speed train in Serbia, and a highway in Montenegro.
And in Macedonia too.
In Macedonia too, okay. And in your opinion, could China's global infrastructure strategy undermine European integration in the Western Balkans? What is the importance of China's economy in your region?
I think so far it's based on these major infrastructure things. So for daily life of people, it doesn't really affect daily politics or population's favorability towards, China as a global actor. There are like people who are inclined to be anti-globalist. They have more favorable opinion about China, but I'm not sure it really enters the, you know, the daily life of people or of daily political debate among political actors. It's still on the margins. However, again, there are two scenarios. If the EU shows leadership and puts the region on a fast track, that would definitely mean door shut for more China's presence. And that's also, I think, one of the potential benefits that integration would bring to EU. However, if there is this prolonged waiting and uncertainty and lack of leadership, that would definitely bring China in the backyard of Europe, Western Balkans, with more and more presence. And then we can expect maybe also investments in other industries, also takeover of some important ports that are important for trade, and that would, I think, be a notable disruption for EU's geopolitical interests.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. Do you have maybe some other questions or comments? So if not, we will stop here. And thank you very much, Borjan, for your lecture and for this debate. We are really very happy to know more about Western Balkans and about the situation in your region. We invite you to our next seminar, 10 of January 2023, this time in Polish, and Professor Anna Wolińska will present, now I will speak in Polish, czy współczesna krytyka rasizmu, antysemityzmu, seksizmu czy klasizmu powinna określać odbiór zastanych tekstów, kultury i decydować o ich aktualnym kształcie i ocenie. So we invite you to this seminar, and now I will wish you already Merry Christmas, and thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you, bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye. And happy Christmas.
Bye. Thank you.